Title: A farmer's job ad turned into an alien plea for help. 5 widows arrived instead. The first rays of dawn broke over the hills of Ember Valley, painting the old farmlands gold. Thomas Hale stood on the porch of his worn-out farmhouse, staring at the endless rows of unplanted soil. For generations his family had worked this land, but lately it felt like the land had given up on him. The drought had lasted 2 years. His savings were gone, the workers had left, and the bank's warning letters were piling up. Out of desperation, Thomas had done something he'd never thought he'd do. He'd placed a help-wanted ad online. Farm help needed. Must be willing to live on site. Experience not required. He didn't care who came as long as they could work. 3 days later his phone pinged. The message wasn't what he expected. "We accept your offer. There are 5 of us. We are widows. Please prepare shelter. We will arrive by nightfall." Thomas frowned. No names, no questions, no details. Just that. And it came from an email with no return address. Only a string of strange symbols that didn't look like any language he'd seen. He shrugged it off as spam and went about his chores. But that night, as the wind howled through the empty fields, he saw something streak across the sky, bright blue fire cutting through the clouds. Then, a deep thud echoed from the far side of his property. He grabbed his flashlight and rifle, heart pounding, and made his way toward the sound. The air smelled of metal and rain. When he reached the lower pasture, the beam of his flashlight fell on something half buried in the dirt, something that looked like a pod. Smooth, metallic, with faint glowing lines running along its sides. Before he could react, the pod hissed open. 5 figures stepped out, wrapped in tattered cloaks that shimmered faintly under the moonlight. They were tall, graceful, and silent. When they lowered their hoods, Thomas stumbled back. Their eyes glowed faint silver, and their skin had a faint, bluish hue, like moonlight reflected on water. One of them, clearly their leader, spoke softly. "You are Thomas Hale, the one who sent the call?" He blinked. "I posted a job ad." She tilted her head. "We received it." The coordinates matched the distress beacon. Thomas lowered his rifle, utterly confused. "Beacon. Lady, I just need help planting corn, not whatever this is." The woman looked back at her companions, sorrow shadowing her face. "Then the signal was misread. But we cannot return. The skies are patrolled. We will work as promised." He stared at them for a long moment. "You'll work on my farm." She nodded. "It is safer than the war." And just like that, the 5 alien widows began their new lives on Earth. By morning, Thomas had half convinced himself it was all a dream. But when he stepped outside, the proof was undeniable. The fields that had been dry and lifeless were now damp, covered in mist. The 5 women were already working, moving with quiet precision. They didn't use tools, only their hands, which emitted faint energy that made the soil shimmer and soften. Within hours, seedlings began to sprout where none should have survived. Thomas stood there, jaw slack. "You're doing that." One of them, a younger widow named Lyra, smiled faintly. "Our world's soil died long ago. We learned how to wake the dead ground." The other widows worked in silence, never asking for food or rest. At night, they sat together by the barn, staring up at the stars, whispering in a language like music. Days turned into weeks. The farm thrived as it never had before. Crops grew tall and strong, and the air seemed sweeter. But Thomas began to notice things. The widows never left the farm. They avoided strangers. And sometimes at night, strange lights pulsed from the barn. One evening, Thomas confronted the leader, the one who had first spoken to him. "Tell me the truth," he said. "What are you hiding in there?" She hesitated. Then, slowly, she motioned for him to follow. Inside the barn, a small pod glowed faintly in the shadows, smaller than the one they'd arrived in, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. "This is the last beacon," she said quietly. "It calls home. Or what's left of it." Thomas frowned. "You're trying to contact your people." She looked up, eyes wet with silvery tears. "No. We are asking them not to come. There is nothing left but war and ruin. We seek peace here on your soil. Your message, it reached us through the void. We thought it was a plea for mercy." Thomas's throat tightened. "It was a job ad." She smiled sadly. "Mercy often hides in humble words." For a long moment the two stood in silence. Then Thomas spoke softly. "You can stay. All of you. For as long as you need." Months passed. The valley flourished. Other farmers began to notice how Hale's land had turned green again. But Thomas told no one the truth. The widows worked beside him each day, blending in slowly, their glow dimming as they learned to appear human. Then one night the sky split open again. A red streak, darker and sharper than before, burned across the heavens. The widows froze. The leader whispered, "They've found us." A beam of crimson light pierced the fields, setting the crops ablaze. Thomas grabbed the pod, trying to drag it toward the barn's cellar. "Go. Hide," he shouted. The widows formed a circle, their hands glowing brighter than ever. They chanted, a sound that shook the air itself. The red beam wavered, flickered, and vanished. The night fell silent again. When the light faded, the widows were gone. Only the crops remained, taller, greener, and shimmering faintly in the moonlight. Thomas fell to his knees, breathless. The pod at his side flickered once more, then dimmed completely. Weeks later, the farm produced the richest harvest Ember Valley had ever seen. The soil never dried again, and sometimes at night, Thomas swore he could hear soft voices in the wind, 5 of them, whispering thanks. He never took down that old job ad. Some nights he'd stand on the porch, look up at the stars, and wonder if another message was traveling through space, another plea for help that might one day find its way home. As autumn settled over Ember Valley, the farm stood in full glory. The soil shimmered under the sun, and the crops grew higher than Thomas had ever seen. The widows had vanished after that terrible night. No footprints, no signs of struggle, just the faint scent of rain and ozone left behind. At first, Thomas thought they'd perished stopping that crimson beam. But as days passed, he began to notice strange things. The fields thrived without tending. The animals were healthier. The air carried a soft hum at dusk, like a lullaby he couldn't quite hear. Then one night, while he was closing up the barn, the smaller pod flickered to life. A familiar silver glow spilled out, and their voices, soft, melodic, heartbreakingly distant, filled the air. "Thomas Hale. The land remembers kindness. We are not gone. We are within what we saved." He fell to his knees, tears burning his eyes. "You did it. You protected us." "No," the voice replied gently. "You gave us a home when no one else would. Now we return the gift. Your soil will never die again." The light faded, and the pod's shell turned to dust, scattering into the wind. From that night onward, the valley never knew drought or blight again. Crops grew even in winter, and a soft, silvery hue danced across the fields whenever the moon was full. Thomas lived out his years tending the farm, never marrying, never leaving.